Welcome back to Chapter 5 of Armageddon, 2419 AD, Setting the Trap. Inside of 15 minutes, we were on our way. A certain amount of caution was sacrificed for the sake of speed, and the men leaped away either across the force top or over open spaces of ground. But concentration was forbidden. The big boss named the spot on the hillside as the rallying point.
"We'll have to take a chance on being seen, so long as we don't group," he declared, "at least until within 5 miles of the rallying spot. From then on, I want every man to disappear from sight and to travel under cover. And keep your ultraphones open and turned on 10-4-7-6."
Wilma and I had received our battle equipment from the gear boss. It consisted of a long gun, a handgun, with a special case of ammunition constructed of inertron, which made the load weigh but a few ounces, and a short sword. This gear we strapped over each other's shoulders on top of our jumping belts. In addition, we each received an ultraphone and a light inertron blanket rolled into a cylinder about 6 inches long by 2 or 3 in diameter. This fabric was exceedingly thin and light, but it had considerable warmth because of the mixture of inertron in its composition. "This looks like business," Wilma remarked to me with sparkling eyes. And I might mention a curious thing here. The word business had survived from the 20th century American vocabulary, but not with any meaning of industry or trade, for such things being purely community activities were spoken of as work or and clearing. Business simply meant fighting, and that was all. "Did you bring all this equipment from the valley?" I asked the gear boss. "No," he said. "There was no time to gather anything. All this stuff we cleared from the Susquannas a few hours ago. I was with the boss on the way down, and he had me jump on ahead and arrange it. But you two had better be moving. He's beckoning you now." Hard was about to call us on our phones when we looked up. As soon as we did so, he leaped away, waving us to follow closely. He was a powerful man, and he darted ahead in long, swift, low leaps up the banks of the stream, which followed a fairly straight course at this point. By extending ourselves, however, Wilma and I were able to catch up to him. As we gradually synchronized our leaps with his, he outlined to us between the grunts that accompanied each leap his plan of action.
"We have to start the big business, sooner or later," he said. "And if the Hans have found any way of locating our positions, it's time to start now. Although the Council of Bosses had intended waiting a few years until enough rocket ships have been built. But no matter what the sacrifice, we can't afford to let them get us on the run. We'll set a trap for the Yellow Devils in the valley. If they come back for their wreckage, and if they don't, we'll go rocketing for some of their liners on the New York or Cleland or Chicago course. We can use that idea of yours of shooting up the repeller beams. I want you to give us a demonstration."
With further admonition to follow him closely, he increased his pace, and Wilma and I were taxed to our utmost to keep up with him. It was only in ascending the slopes that my tougher muscles overbalanced his greater skill, and I was able to set the pace for him as I had for Wilma. We slept in greater comfort that night under our inertron blankets, and were off with the dawn, leaping cautiously to the top of the ridge, overlooking the valley which Wilma and I had left. The boss scanned the sky with his ultrascope, patiently taking some 15 minutes to the task, and then swung his phone into use, calling the roll and giving the men their instructions. His first order was for us all to slip our ear and chest discs into permanent position. These ultraphones were quite different from the ones used by Wilma's companion scout the day I saved her from the vicious attack of the bandit gang. That one was contained entirely in a small pocket case. These, with which we were now equipped, consisted of a pair of ear discs, each a separate and self-contained receiving set. They slipped into little pockets over our ears in the fabric helmets we wore, and shut out virtually all extraneous sounds. The chest discs were likewise self-contained sending sets, strapped to the chest a few inches below the neck and actuated by the vibrations from the vocal cords through the body tissue. The total range of these sets was about 18 miles. Reception was remarkably clear, quite free from the static that so marked the 20th century radios, and of a strength in direct proportion to the distance of the speaker. The boss set was triple powered, so that his orders would cut in on any local conversations, which were indulged in, however, with great restraint, and only for the purpose of maintaining contacts. I marveled at the efficiency of this modern method of battle communication in contrast to the clumsy signaling devices of more ancient times, and also at other military contrasts in which the 20th and 25th century methods were the reverse of each other in efficiency. These modern Americans, for instance, knew little of hand to hand fighting and nothing, naturally, of trench warfare. Of barrages, they were quite ignorant, although they possessed weapons of terrific power, and until my recent flash of inspiration, no one among them, apparently, had ever thought of the scheme of shooting a rocket into a repeller beam and letting the beam itself hurl it upward into the most vital part of the Han ship. Hard patiently placed his men, first giving his instructions to his camp masters, and then remained silent while they placed the individuals. In the end, the 100 men were ranged about the valley, on the hillsides and tops, each in a position from which he had a good view of the wreckage of the Han ship. But not a man had come in view, so far as I could see in the whole process. The boss explained to me that it was his idea that he, Wilma, and I should investigate the wreck. If Han ships should appear in the sky, we would leap for the hillsides. I suggested to him to have the men set up their long guns trained on an imaginary circle surrounding the wreck. He busied himself with this after the three of us leaped down to the Han ship, serving as a target himself, while he called on the men individually to aim their pieces and lock them in position. In the meantime, Wilma and I had climbed into the wreckage, but did not find much. Practically all of the instruments and machinery had been twisted out of all recognizable shape, or utterly destroyed by the ship's disintegrator rays, which apparently had continued to operate in the midst of its warped remains for some moments after the crash. It was unpleasant work searching the mangled bodies of the crew, but it had to be done. The Han clothing, I observed, was quite different than that of the Americans, and in many respects more like the garb to which I had been accustomed in the earlier part of my life. It was made of synthetic fabrics like silks, loose and comfortable trousers of knee length, and sleeveless shirts. No protection except that against drafts was needed, Wilma explained to me, for the Han cities were entirely enclosed, with splendid arrangements for ventilation and heating. These arrangements, of course, were equally adequate in their airships. The Hans, indeed, had quite a distaste for unshaded daylight, since their lighting apparatus diffused a controlled amount of violet rays, making the unmodified sunlight unnecessary for health and undesirable for comfort. Since the Hans did not have the secret of inertron, none of them wore anti-gravity belts. Yet in spite of the fact that they had to bear their own full weights at all times, they were physically far inferior to the Americans, for they lived lives of degenerative physical inertia, having machinery of every description for the performance of all labor and convenient conveyances for any movement of more than a few steps. Even from the twisted wreckage of this ship, I could see that the seats, chairs, and couches played an extremely important part in their scheme of existence.